The moment the CTO asked how many stock options I had, I knew exactly how this story would end. Just not how beautifully. We were sitting in an overpriced Aspen retreat, pretending to be visionary leaders while sipping cucumber water as if it were liquid genius. One by one, the CTO went down the row of executives, asking each how many shares they held, like he was conducting a census of cattle before the culling. When he finally looked at me, I didn't blink. "None," I said. "Never asked." You could have heard a pin drop on the reclaimed wood table. The CTO, all smug in his 1200 sneakers and brand new Patagonia vest, tilted his head like he'd found a bug in his quinoa salad. "No equity?" he repeated, turning to the board chair as if I'd confessed to a felony. Then he smirked. "Dead weight. That's what he called me." Dead weight. The woman who built the system that kept their billion-dollar infrastructure alive, who prevented 3 breaches last year while he was busy recording podcast interviews about disruptive leadership. The room shifted. I could feel it. Subtle. Cold. Like someone cracked a window in a blizzard. Nobody defended me. Not legal. Not finance. Not even the COO who once called me the engine under the hood. They all stared at their sparkling water and gluten-free muffins, waiting for the storm to pass. So I smiled. Just a small, sharp curve of the lips. The kind of smile that says you have no idea what you've just stepped in. After the meeting, I walked back to my cabin, boots crunching in the snow, and poured myself a cup of hotel-grade coffee sludge. Bitter. Burnt. Like dignity at a discount. That night, I didn't think about equity or stock options. I thought about patents. 14 of them, to be exact. All quietly written, submitted, and approved under a Delaware LLC I'd formed back when I was still contracting. Long before the company had a name, a logo, or even a payroll. Back when no one cared who wrote the code, only that it worked. No one had ever asked me to reassign ownership when they hired me full-time. Rookie mistake on their part, the kind that costs corporations millions. But who reads paperwork when you're too busy curating thought leadership threads for LinkedIn? I had asked once, years ago, about formal ownership, about a proper IP contract. My then boss said, "It's not the right time. We'll take care of you after Series C." She left for a crypto startup 6 months later. I stopped asking. When people keep moving the goalpost, you stop kicking. While they measured value in stock tickers and buzzwords, I was busy building the bones of the product, the invisible core of everything they bragged about on stage. I didn't just build it, I owned it, and soon they'd remember that. 3 days after that equity inquisition, I got the email. "Team realignment. Please meet with HR." No explanation, just the kind of sterile subject line that corporate assassins love. Everyone knows what that means. Still, I showed up. Blazer, clean lines, hair up, no mascara, no tears. Just quiet fury. They sat me in a small conference room with fake plants and motivational posters about synergy. Across from me, the HR director, Melissa, clutched her clipboard like a riot shield. Next to her was a security guard pretending to scroll through his phone. "Lena," she began, voice trembling. "First, we want to recognize your outstanding contributions." "Skip it," I said. "Just get to the part where I'm being walked out." Her face tightened. "Due to recent strategic restructuring, your position has been sunset." Sunset? Like I was some dying screensaver. She slid a beige envelope across the table. Termination without cause. No severance. No continuation. No apology. I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it back on the table. "Okay," I said, standing. Melissa blinked. "Okay?" "Yeah." "Okay." I packed my things. Coffee mug, faded sticky notes. My favorite USB drive I didn't even need, but took out of spite. As I walked out, no one looked up. Not the interns I'd mentored, not the analysts I'd helped promote, not even the CFO whose forecasting model I rewrote during that last crisis. Eyes on screens, headphones in, silence roaring. My badge beeped one last time at the exit, then nothing. No goodbye drinks, no email thread, just digital erasure. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't post about bittersweet new beginnings. Because I knew something they didn't. You don't own a person who still holds the patents to your kingdom. The next morning, the city looked different. Colder, sharper, quieter. I found a small co-working space 2 blocks from my apartment. Not one of those glossy startup dens with kombucha taps and neon signs about hustle culture. No, this place had creaky floors, burnt coffee, and a smell of old ambition. Perfect. I took a corner desk under a flickering fluorescent light, opened my oldest laptop, and waited for the hum of the fan to settle. The desktop appeared, cluttered with forgotten folders and half-finished scripts. But there it was. The one that mattered. EW Systems Holdings. My Delaware LLC. Still active. Still mine. 14 patents sat inside, filed back when I was still freelancing, and too paranoid to put my real name on intellectual property. Back then, I'd read an article about independent developers losing their rights to corporations. So I did what the paranoid do best. I prepared, filed everything through an LLC, wrote my own transfer clauses, built the legal firewall before I built the digital one. Now, staring at those patent numbers, compression protocols, memory scrubbers, adaptive network routing, I realized the entire Valoratech stack still ran on them. They'd been bragging about innovation, but their golden product was powered by my architecture, my bones, and legally, every bite of it was mine. I logged into the Delaware portal and renewed the LLC. 10 minutes later, EW Systems Holdings was alive again, legally, operationally, and soon, strategically. Then I began the paperwork to create a new entity, Northbridge IP Licensing. This one had stricter terms. One-way sub-licensing, no perpetual use. Automatic audit triggers for violations. By the time I finished, the sun had slipped behind the skyline, painting the windows in pale orange. I poured another cup of that bitter coffee and smiled. Let them think they'd won. Let them think I walked away empty-handed. I wasn't starting over. I was reclaiming what was already mine. The next move was surgical. I opened my email and drafted 2 messages. Subject line: Licensing Opportunity, Proprietary Kernel Stack IP. Short, clean, clinical. One went to Pinnacle Systems, Valoratech's biggest rival in the enterprise software market. The other went to Horizon Edge, a smaller but aggressive player known for scooping up stranded clients. Both replied within hours. Pinnacle wanted a meeting. Horizon wanted details. It felt like watching chess pieces slide into position on their own. For years, Valoratech had treated me like an expendable pawn. They were about to find out I was the one who'd built the board. That night, I got a ping on my encrypted Proton mail. The sender's name was hidden, but the subject line made me smirk. You might want to see this. Inside was a screenshot of a Slack thread from Valoratech's compliance channel. A junior auditor had asked, "Can someone confirm if the EW kernel modules are still under valid licensing? Last renewal I see is from FY21. No response, just silence. Digital tumbleweeds. It had begun. The first crack in the facade. A day later, another email arrived. This one from Valoratech's largest client, a logistics company whose annual contract was worth more than the rest of their customers combined. Their renewal came back redlined, one comment circled in bold. Please confirm all core modules remain covered under active IP license, cannot proceed without assurance of patent compliance. I laughed, quietly, to myself. When legal and sales start sweating in the same week, you know the storm's coming. Meanwhile, Valoratech's CTO, Mr. Deadweight himself, was probably pacing around his glass office, barking at engineers to check the code base or verify IP documentation. But he wouldn't find what he was looking for, because it was never there. I pictured the panic, Slack threads on fire, lawyers whispering, executives pretending nothing was wrong, and me, 2 miles away, sipping cheap coffee in peace, watching the empire I built start to crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. This wasn't vengeance. Not yet. This was the prelude, a quiet, legal recalibration, the whisper before the detonation. By Friday, the whispers had turned into tremors. I didn't need to dig through leaks or gossip forums. The panic practically echoed through the industry. Valoratech's compliance team was running full forensic audits. Their lawyers were calling the patent office, and their CTO, according to one anonymous message I got, was losing his mind. Someone sent me a blurry photo of his whiteboard. The words EW Kernel 7.1 were scrawled in all caps, circled 3 times. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then came the tweet. It started like all tech fires do, with a curious outsider poking around where they shouldn't. A mid-level analyst named Devin Park, who ran a niche account dedicated to dissecting enterprise software licenses, posted this. Noticed every major network security product now lists licensed under Northbridge IP Holdings. Anyone know what that is? Under it, a screenshot, a product dashboard. Bottom corner, small gray text. Licensed under Northbridge IP Holdings. All rights reserved. 14 words. That's all it took. Within hours, tech Twitter exploded. People speculated, cross-referenced, reverse-engineered. Someone even traced the Delaware filings back to my LLC. My name wasn't hidden anymore. I'd known that day would come, and I didn't mind. Threads sprouted like wildfire. One broke down each of my 14 patents, line by line, explaining how they were the foundation of every innovative product Valoratech bragged about. Another created memes. Someone pasted my initials over the Matrix code stream, captioned, "I am the stack." Cute. By noon, #Lena Brooks was trending under tech and business. Analysts called it the silent IP coup. Reporters called it corporate checkmate. And Valoratech's board? They called an emergency meeting. I wasn't in that room, of course, but someone sent me a redacted transcript, forwarded twice. Time-stamped 7:02 a.m. The subject line read, IP escalation, urgent. The external counsel, a white shoe firm from New York, didn't mince words. None of the kernel patents were properly reassigned during her employment. They were filed through her LLC prior to conversion. Valoratech has no enforceable claim to the IP. Silence. You could almost hear the collective breath being held across the table. The CTO reportedly snapped first. "That's impossible," he barked. "She built those modules while on salary." "Yes," the lawyer replied, calm and surgical. "But the modules in question predate her full-time employment. Without an IP reassignment clause, your continued use constitutes unlicensed deployment." Translation: you've been pirating your own product. Someone, probably the VP of sales, panicked next. We've already lost 2 renewal deals this week. One client's demanding indemnity if we can't prove ownership. And that's when the CFO asked the million-dollar question. Are we covered by insurance? The lawyer paused. Depends how you define misrepresentation and material risk. Corporate code for good luck, you're screwed. The new head of product, that self-proclaimed growth visionary, reportedly asked if they could just rebuild the stack. I almost spit out my coffee when I read that. Rebuild? Sure. If they wanted to spend 2 years and $50 million replacing code, they didn't even understand. You can't duct tape open source fragments onto proprietary architecture and call it a fix. By the time I finished the transcript, I was laughing, quietly, darkly. Not out of cruelty, but symmetry, karma with a logic flow. I closed my laptop and looked around the small co-working room. A few freelancers tapped away at keyboards. One guy muttered to himself over spreadsheets. Life went on, ordinary, while somewhere downtown, a $300 million company was realizing its golden product was built on borrowed bones. I didn't post. I didn't brag. I didn't even respond to the dozen journalists sliding into my inbox. Because I didn't need to. The code was speaking for me now, line by line, clause by clause. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was justice. Quiet, elegant, and perfectly executable. The leak hit a full week later. Not from me, of course. It never needed to. It started as a redacted PDF on a developer forum, posted by someone who claimed to be just curious. The file name read Audit/Confidential Internal, PDF, but every engineer who opened it knew exactly what it meant. A single line stood out in bold. Critical IP exposure identified. Proprietary kernel modules under non-validated license. In plain English, Valoratech couldn't legally prove it owned its own backbone. From there, it spiraled. A few small clients quietly suspended renewals, citing pending verification of IP chain of custody. Then a mid-sized government contractor, one of Valoratech's crown jewels, issued a formal notice of breach. They wanted indemnity for any potential infringement tied to Northbridge kernel assets. Translation: pay us or we walk. Inside Valoratech, chaos spread faster than a bad firmware update. The CTO resigned first, to pursue new opportunities in the innovation space. The press release was pure comedy. Grayscale headshot, buzzword salad, a farewell with gratitude and optimism. The kind of PR fluff that screams forced exit. The new head of product tried damage control, holding an all-hands meeting to reassure staff of the company's continued commitment to innovation. A brave intern leaked a screenshot of the anonymous Q&A. One question stood out. Are we still legally allowed to sell the product? The answer? We're evaluating all options with external counsel. In other words, we have no idea what we own anymore. Then came the investor calls. The whispers turned into headlines. Valoratech faces IP. Licensing uncertainty amid leadership turmoil. Stock froze. Partners paused integration projects. Clients panicked. Meanwhile, I sat in my corner of that creaky co-working space, sipping burnt coffee and watching the digital storm swirl through my monitor. I didn't gloat, didn't tweet, didn't feed the fire. Because the truth didn't need oxygen. It burned on its own. Still, I couldn't help but savor the irony. The same man who called me dead weight had just tanked the company's valuation by nearly $90 million. All because he didn't read the fine print. Then came the message from Marcus Chen, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Pinnacle Systems, Valoratech's oldest rival. He wanted a private meeting. Discreet, off-record, no assistants, no slides, just talk. We met at a quiet restaurant tucked behind a museum in Denver, the kind of place with heavy curtains and no background music. Marcus arrived exactly on time, a thin folder under his arm. No handshake games, no fake charm, just calm precision. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "we'd like to license your patents. All 14. Long-term, with an option to renew." I nodded slowly. "And what else?" He smiled faintly. "We don't just want your code. We want your mind. Advisory position. You help us build the next generation architecture. In return, equity, board seat, first right of refusal on derivative patents." I let that hang for a moment, glancing out the window where snow drifted across the streetlights. Funny how small everything felt once you'd walked away from it. "One condition?" I said finally. Marcus tilted his head. Go on. You may not sub-license any portion of this IP to Valoratech, directly or indirectly. No exceptions. If they so much as touch a single module, you're in breach. He didn't hesitate, reached into the folder, took out the draft contract, and wrote it in by hand. Done, he said, sliding the paper toward me. The deal closed in under an hour. No PowerPoint, no lawyers hovering, just clarity. They didn't care about Valoratech's survival. They wanted dominance. And I was handing them the weapon, perfectly legal, perfectly timed. As I left, I looked at the signed contract and felt it settle in my chest like gravity returning to its rightful place. I hadn't burned a bridge. I'd built a fortress. I drove home that night with the contract still on the passenger seat, the edges of the folder catching the streetlight. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost, only what I'd built. Not revenge, not even victory, just equilibrium. I'd spent years being the invisible architect, the woman behind the curtain who made everything run but never got credit. Now, my name was in the footer of every license agreement that mattered, not as an employee, as the owner. When I got home, I poured a drink and read through the contract again. The ink from Marcus's handwritten clause, no sublicensing to Valoratech, directly or indirectly, looked almost poetic. Legal language, yes, but to me it was a line of code. One that would execute perfectly, silently, every time Valoratech tried to crawl back into relevance. Within 2 weeks, Pinnacle Systems rolled out the first official build using my IP. Clean, compliant, future-proof. And as their clients migrated from Valoratech's crumbling stack to Pinnacle's stable architecture, I watched the market react. No press release, no gloating. Just quiet exits from contracts, silent terminations, redlined renewals. Valoratech's balance sheet began bleeding, not from leaks, but from clauses. Then came the meltdown. A junior engineer at Valoratech, desperate to prepare for an audit, ran a dependency trace through their primary product. What he found was a horror movie for executives. Nearly 70% of the entire system still ran on kernel modules tied to Northbridge IP holdings. My company. Buried, hard-coded, obfuscated, but still traceable. My initials appeared in function tags, naming conventions, even log directories. Proof that no matter how they rebranded or repackaged, they couldn't replace what I'd built. The audit report leaked the next day. Redacted, of course, but not enough. The section headers alone told the story. Unresolved licensing exposure. Third-party patent dependencies. High-risk kernel components. Every engineer who read it understood immediately, you can't ship software when you can't prove you own it. The fallout was surgical. 3 mid-sized clients suspended renewals. A fourth, a federal agency, froze payments pending legal verification. Their notice was brutal in its simplicity. We will not deploy potentially infringing technology within a government network. Translation: you're radioactive. Valoratech's PR team tried to contain the bleeding. They issued a press release about exciting architectural modernization and a bold roadmap to rebuild from the ground up. Anyone in tech knew what that really meant. We're rewriting everything we stole and praying no one sues before it compiles. The stock plummeted. Analysts began whispering about insolvency. A leaked investor memo projected potential losses exceeding $88 million tied to client churn and contract penalties. Internally, the board was eating itself alive. The CTO's resignation had triggered an avalanche of finger-pointing. The CFO blamed legal blamed engineering. The CEO blamed legacy oversight. The engineers blamed management. And me? I blamed no one. I just watched. Emails started flooding my inbox. Journalists, analysts, old colleagues suddenly eager to reconnect. Some said they always believed in me. Others wanted exclusive interviews. I didn't answer any of them. The truth didn't need my voice. It was already written into every clause, every kernel, every failed renewal notice. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had called me dead weight. And yet now, without me, their entire empire had become weightless, collapsing under its own emptiness. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Kernel 8.0 Project. No details, no specs, just a name. I wasn't done, not even close. The next version of my work wouldn't just be secure, it would be untouchable. Some people burn bridges. I build clauses that make the bridges disappear. 2 weeks after the first leak, the world finally caught up. Business outlets started circling like vultures, running half-baked headlines about the engineer who owned the future. A mid-tier tech magazine reached out with a proposal for an in-depth feature. Normally, I would have ignored it. But the writer, Ava Klein, had a reputation for getting stories right. No fluff, no fake heroics, just truth, stripped clean. We met in a small cafe near Union Station. She arrived with a tiny recorder and a stack of printed patent filings. No nonsense. No questions about how it felt. Just walk me through what happened, line by line. For an hour, I did. From the early contracting days and the Delaware filings, to the quiet creation of Northbridge IP Holdings, to the boardroom silence the day I was called dead weight. She listened, scribbling notes without interrupting. When we finished, she closed the notebook and said, "You know, you didn't just get revenge. You rewrote the ownership model of modern software." I smiled faintly. No, I just read the fine print. The article dropped the following Monday. The title was simple: The Woman Who Owned the Stack. My face on the cover. No blazer, no arms-crossed CEO pose. Just me, in jeans and a black t-shirt, half smiling like someone who already knew the ending. Inside, Ava laid out everything: the licensing oversight, the board's negligence, the quiet legal brilliance of structuring IP through an LLC. No spin, no victimhood, just facts. The reaction was immediate. Engineers called it poetic. Founders called it terrifying. Investors called it a case study in due diligence failure. Valoratech called their lawyers. 2 days later, I received an email from the Valoratech board. Subject: We'd like to speak. 7 words. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a ghost reaching back from the wreckage. I deleted it without replying. You don't negotiate with people who once tried to erase you. Instead, I opened my portfolio site. A minimalist landing page with one purpose: licensing requests. Clean typography, no fluff. I added a new section at the bottom. Coming Q1. Kernel 8.0. 0. Exclusive to limited partners. No details, no promo. Just a promise. The industry would fill in the blanks. Within 24 hours, the page had over 500,000 views. My inbox exploded with inquiries, some from Fortune 500 CTOs, others from founders desperate to secure early access. Every single message ended with the same question: Are you open to collaboration? I replied to only one. Marcus Chen from Pinnacle. The rest could wait. Meanwhile, Valoratech kept unraveling. Another round of layoffs. Another desperate strategic realignment. Their CEO did a tone-deaf podcast about learning from failure that went viral for all the wrong reasons. Memes flooded Reddit. When you fire the engineer who owns your IP. One had the caption, "Guess who's licensed now?" But I didn't laugh. Not out loud. There was nothing funny about watching hundreds of innocent employees lose jobs because of arrogance at the top. That's the part no one ever sees. The collateral damage of hubris. I wasn't out to destroy them. I just enforced the truth. Late one night, as I reviewed the draft framework for Kernel 8.0, I noticed something small but satisfying. The date stamp on my original Delaware filing. Exactly 6 years to the day before my termination meeting. Perfect symmetry. The system had come full circle. Justice in business doesn't roar. It echoes. quietly, precisely, through every clause, every audit, every contract that someone should have read. I'd built something indestructible not because I wanted power, but because I'd learned what happens when you give it away. And now, the industry finally understood that lesson too. By the end of the quarter, the silence was complete. Valoratech's name still floated on old press releases and outdated resumes, but the company itself was a shell. The meltdown hadn't been explosive. It was slow, clinical, inevitable. You could trace it through digital footprints, abandoned repositories, unanswered client tickets, a dwindling stock price that finally flatlined at zero. No fireworks, no courtroom showdown, just entropy. The final blow came quietly. Pinnacle Systems, now armed with my technology and their own resources, absorbed 3 of Valoratech's former enterprise clients in a single week. Each new contract carried the same legal signature. Licensed under Northbridge IP Holdings. All rights reserved. It was the watermark of the new order. A few journalists tried to paint it as a vendetta, the engineer who destroyed her own company. They missed the point entirely. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd enforced the rules they'd ignored. I didn't burn bridges. I just revoked unauthorized access. Still, every so often, I'd get an email from someone who used to work under me. "You were right," one read. "They never valued us until they needed us." Another said simply, "Thank you for showing that it's okay to walk away." Those messages meant more than any feature article. They weren't applause. They were understanding. One evening, I walked past Valoratech's old headquarters. The glass building was dark except for a few floors still lit, probably leased to another startup chasing the same delusions. The giant LED sign with their logo had been turned off. Only its faint outline remained on the wall. It looked ghostly, like a memory the world had almost deleted. I stood there for a while, coffee in hand, watching the reflection of city lights ripple across the empty lobby. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like balance restored. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop. My site's analytics showed that Kernel 8.0 pre-registration had already crossed 1 million visits. Companies wanted in. Venture funds were sending feelers for partnership stakes. A few even tried to buy Northbridge outright. I ignored them all. You can't sell what defines you. Instead, I drafted a short statement for the homepage. Not a manifesto, just a line of truth. Innovation means nothing without ownership. Read every clause. Keep every receipt. That night, I finally let myself exhale. Years of restraint, humiliation, and quiet preparation had condensed into one outcome: freedom. Not wealth, not fame, just freedom. The kind that doesn't need validation or applause. The kind that sits quietly beside you like a loyal companion, humming with certainty. People think stories like this end with revenge, the hero standing in the ashes of a fallen empire. But that's not how life works. In reality, revenge is just gravity reasserting itself. You don't need to push anyone off the cliff. You just stop holding them up. A week later, Ava Klein emailed again. Her new article's headline made me laugh. "The ghost in the machine owns the building." It was a fitting epilogue. The piece wasn't about me anymore. It was about the precedent. Startups across the country were now reviewing their IP assignments. Founders were suddenly terrified of the Brooks Clause, as they called it. A reminder that sometimes the quiet engineer in the corner isn't replaceable. She's foundational. I closed the tab and looked out my window. The city buzzed below. Same chaos, same greed, same ambition. But somewhere inside all that noise, I'd carved a space that couldn't be erased. No lawsuits, no viral victory laps, just one immutable truth written into every footer line that mattered. Licensed under Northbridge IP Holdings. All rights reserved. They thought firing me erased me. Instead, it immortalized me. In code, in contract, in permanence. The silence they mistook for surrender was, in fact, the terms of their surrender. Permanent, binding, irrevocable, just like me.